Hi, my name is Jake Jackson. I'm an ultramarathon runner and work as a feeder driver at UPS in Ontario, California.
In the middle of a railroad track, I looked around and I knew there was no turning back.
I think that was kind of the beginning of where I just took this different direction in life, not really caring too much about my health. It was more about just having fun, and started probably drinking too much, smoking too much, and yeah, that went on for several years. My wife and I, we got to a point where it was just like, we need to do something for our health. Yeah, that's kind of where the whole running thing got introduced back into my life. The whole 24-hour thing was kind of a fluke of how I found out that I was pretty good at it. I started out running just kind of the typical way. You do your local 5K, 10K, half marathon. There was a local race called Nanny Goat, and they had a 24-hour race. And I was like, well, 24 hours on a 1 mile loop, broke the course record there. And somebody said, hey, you qualified to run this other race called Desert Solstice. Went and ran that and ended up running 157 miles just out of the blue. Didn't know really what I was doing. And hey, find out you qualified to run for the U.S. national team in 2019.
How do you manage the full-time job, children, wife, having a life outside of running? How do you balance all that?
The whole question of balance, I don't really believe that there is a balance. Those people that say that they love running, I think it's just them trying to convince themselves that they do it, because running sucks sometimes. There's no way around it. I mean, nobody likes to get up that early in the morning to get a run in. I mean, granted, there's tons of mental, benefits to doing it. And I always tell my coworkers, like, me going out and running 10 miles is the hardest thing I do. And I do it right at the beginning of the day. So whatever stress that comes later on during the day, it's like, well, you've already done something harder than that. So I think the biggest thing that I've become to realize is that there's no like final destination with this stuff, and it can be used towards life too. You set your goals and you think, once I reach this certain level, I'll have made it. And I don't think we ever actually make it. I think we just continue on to the next thing. I think as humans, we always want more, but you got to understand that more is not always the thing that's going to like fulfill you.
Your longest race ever.
Yeah.
How are you feeling? What's the emotion like right now?
Drained for one. So sometimes you just have to chase those big, scary goals. And no matter what the outcome, know that you at least had the guts to go after them. That was you who said that.
Get out of your comfort zone, I think, is one of the biggest things I've been like trying to do over the past couple of years. Don't settle on knowing that you're going to finish something. Pick something that seems hard that you're more than likely will fail at, and you might surprise yourself.
The Patina'd Podcast is about the earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd Podcast.
All right. So welcome to another episode of the Patina'd Podcast. Today's guest is Jake Jackson, and what Jake is most well known for is being a UPS driver. That's what the world seems to know him as, and so I'm just kind of joking, but it is something that I want to talk about today because I think it's incredible. So yeah, so for you being most well known as a UPS driver, what was your hardest route as a UPS driver? Have you ever had a route that made you want to quit and just drop out right then?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do the long big rig driving now. I don't deliver too many packages to doors anymore, thankfully. Yeah, I spent about a year in actual package delivery. And yeah, there was a few, when you start out as a delivery driver, they kind of give you the worst routes there are. You kind of just get thrown to the wolves, thrown out in the middle of the ocean, and you have to basically fend for yourself out there. And there was several nights where I got behind in my route, and your sun goes down, and the freaks come out and get stuck in some of these bad neighborhoods. And yeah, it gets a little sketchy out there, but thankfully most people, they see UPS driver, they see the uniform, and they give us, a certain level of respect, and they don't mess with us too much. But yeah, there was a few nights out there where I went home and I could not believe I survived some of those areas that I'd been through. And you get the typical dogs chasing you, and that kind of stuff. But yeah, for the most part, it's a pretty safe job, at least where I was delivering at. So.
Yeah, I was a mailman for about a year, a little bit over maybe, and so I can relate on some level, especially with the dogs and certain areas and kind of being thrown to the wolves. So in preparation for this interview, I asked a client of mine who is a UPS driver. So I thought you're still like doing the package delivery stuff, but
yeah.
So I'm like, give me some insights into UPS driving that would be a totally different take on what normally Jake Jackson's audience would be used to hearing. But so anyway, it was kind of like some of the things he was relating to was how, you'll just randomly get things added on to a shift that you weren't prepared for. And, like you're hoping to go home and nope, we have this neighborhood that you got to go to instead, and going into a new neighborhood like downtown or something like that. And being totally thrown off because of the chaos of not knowing the address of the buildings. The address of the buildings don't make any sense to you, and being kind of lost on a new route. But you transferred then into the big rig driving. Why did you do that? Because you hated the package delivery, or was it because it was like as soon as it was an option, you're like, I'm getting out of here?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the progression with the way the company works. It's all based on seniority. The union takes care of all that stuff. And when I went into package, it was with the intent of going into the feeder department, is what we call the big truck driving. And at the time when I went into package, I was already running, so I was putting 80, 90 miles running, and then plus being on my feet all day long. And I started to feel the wear and tear of doing that. And so transferring into the feeder department, one, I was not on my feet all day, and I was running at a pretty high level. But the strange thing happened where I was sitting a lot more. So go out and run, 10, 15 miles in the morning, and then have to sit all day on your butt. I would get tightened up, and the muscles would get stiff. So it was like a flip of being active all day long and not being fully recovered for the running part, to running pretty well, but then sitting all day long. So yeah, I mean, the job is a lot less stressful in some ways. The company focuses more on safety in the feeder department. You get into an accident and it costs them tons of money. Whereas when you were delivering packages, it was numbers. They wanted you to hit a certain pieces per hour. And, if you would do well, they would eventually just pile more work on you to get more packages delivered. So it was both a stress thing and a recovery aspect that was the biggest reason that I, decided to go into the feeder department. So.
Yeah. I saw recently you had a commercial with UPS. So that's freaking awesome. That's really cool. Like do you get paid well for that sort of thing? Like them throwing clout your way? Like how does that work?
No, I didn't
More sponsorship?
No, I didn't get anything from doing that.
Oh man.
Yeah, the safety department in the feeder department, they started this new thing where they were just trying to promote, safe driving and all that. And one of the guys had been doing short videos of some of the other drivers, spotlighting certain drivers. And he approached me last year before I was going to go run for the US 24-hour team in Taiwan. And he was like, we should do something together. And he reached out to corporate, and they were totally behind it. And it was probably about a 6 to 8 month process of just building a story. And yeah, it was really cool. They were basically going to use it as promotional purposes. And yeah, it turned out really well. It's something that the guy that was shooting the videos, he hopes to do more of in the future for the company. And yeah, it was really cool to have, see kind of, UPS is very much, the brown and the delivering the packages and being reliable, but they wanted to kind of spotlight, that we're also people outside of our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just all about work all the time. So it was really cool to have that opportunity to show what we're actually capable of outside of just working all the time.
Yeah, that's really cool. But man, if they're not paying you and they're not jumping on the Jake Jackson bandwagon and like putting some type of logo on you while you're running these races, they're missing out on an opportunity, man. That's crazy.
Unfortunately, the company has kind of turned a corner in they're more about their stockholders and making money for them rather than the employee. It's kind of unfortunate, but these big corporations, that's kind of the way they all run these days. So
yep.
Yeah.
It's always going to turn that way. It's always, and the bigger the corporation, the more it's going to go that way for sure.
Right.
Yeah, I even see that within the clinical world. You see, if there's a program, let's say it's a residential addiction program or something, the bigger that program gets, the easier it is for them to take on patients that they shouldn't be taking on or clients they shouldn't be taking on because they're financially focused instead of clinically focused or patient focused. That almost always happens. The larger the program gets, the more popular they get, the more they lose their focus on the client in front of them instead they're looking at money. But yeah, I joked at the beginning that you're most well known as a UPS driver, but obviously you're a world-class athlete, and being somebody, one of I think 5 men, maybe, or maybe I'm way off on that number, but that was part of Team USA 24-hour race team, which is it makes you a remarkable runner, right? It makes you a pretty remarkable runner. And so I'm really interested in how you got to that path. How did you get there?
Yeah, the whole 24-hour thing was kind of a fluke of how I found out that I was pretty good at it. I started out running just kind of the typical way. You do your local 5K, 10K, half marathons, I had dreams of running Boston, and I got to do that several times. And I think with the whole road running scene, it got to the point where it was a lot more about your time, hitting your splits. And I had a group of friends who were getting into trail running, and I started joining them on some of their trail runs and really enjoyed that, and spent a couple years, building my way up to running a couple 100-milers in the mountains, and had, relatively good, success. I was never going to, win Western States or win some of these bigger, races, but enjoyed the scene, enjoyed the community, and did that for like 2 or 3 years. And then there was a local race that was, about a half an hour drive from our house. And it's called Nanny Goat. I've run it probably more times than any other race. And they had a 24-hour race. And I was like, well, 24 hours on a 1-mile loop, you just run, see how many loops you can do in 24 hours. I was like, well, let's go down this path, fall into another rabbit hole when it comes to ultra running, because there's just so many different areas to go into these days. And first time I ended up running 134 miles, broke the course record there. And somebody said, hey, you qualified to run this other race called Desert Solstice that's held on a high school track in Arizona. That same year I qualified, went around that, and ended up running 157 miles just out of the blue. Didn't know really what I was doing. Second 24-hour race, did really well there. That was the year that Camille Herron broke the women's world record, finished second just behind her. And hey, find out you qualified to run for the U.S. national team in 2019. And so basically 3 24-hour races, and I was running for the U.S. team, which was when crazy. I started, I had no clue what that was. And I think, the fact that I had all those years running road marathons and pacing and I'd actually been the person holding the pacing flag at some of those races and was really good at that. It just kind of came naturally to me, and it kind of opened up a whole new door for me in running, and just it was a nice break from running, up in the mountains. I could do both, which made it really excited. So that's kind of the initial story with how I got into the 24-hour stuff and making the U.S. team twice now. And it's been a really cool way to see different parts of the world. And just one thing after another, I guess, just kept building on itself.
All right, just a quick pause. Firstly, I want to thank you. I want to thank all the people that have been subscribing. The show has grown. So I have a 1-week challenge for you, the listener, to do something daily that's going to put yourself in a situation to fail or be rejected or do something that sounds miserable in a good way. Don't be vague about this challenge. Sit down, write it down with a pen and paper, and it's likely something that you want to already do for yourself. This could be asking out that barista that you think is cute. This could be taking a cold plunge every day or a cold shower. This could be like calling up people that you need to reconcile with or ask forgiveness from. This could be just starting up that daily practice that you've wanted to do for a long time, like journal and prayer. This could mean going and getting that free trial at the nearest jiu-jitsu class. This could mean getting creative in the kitchen and trying different meals and different ideas. Or it could mean just meal prepping. So there are a ton of different things that you can do that helps build up your ability to take on normal misery and become more resilient. And if you already did this challenge last week, then go ahead and start a new challenge or continue to progress off the challenge that you did last week. For example, if it was trying to run a further distance than you've ever ran, you can continue to progress that forward. Or if it was something else from an exercise perspective, like doing 500 push-ups a day, you can progress that to then 550 or 600 push-ups a day. Or you can just take on something totally new that you're interested in. The number one rule is this can't cause lasting harm to yourself or someone else. So don't do anything stupid. This all has to be based in the idea of building yourself up in a healthy way, which leads into the second rule, which is this has to push up against your avoidance. This has to push up against something that you're avoiding to do for yourself. Again, that is healthy for you. That's the challenge. Let's keep normalizing the idea of chasing failure, seeking it out, and pushing ourselves in ways that we never thought was imaginable. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
So you're running a ton of races. Like, I don't know. Does it seem like it's becoming more and more common that ultra runners? It seemed like ultra runners would run like 3 big races a year or something like that. But it seems like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it seems like ultra runners are running on a regular basis now. These longer runs. I know you just finished up one this weekend, 2 days ago?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay, yeah. So you just finished up 50K yesterday, it seems like these people are running them almost every weekend or at a much higher rate. Am I off on that, or is that just a normal thing for people?
I think the way ultra running people are able to do that, it's such a long distance that you're not running full speed, so you're not breaking down your body as quickly. And I think just the fact that it's ultra running, but you're really not running the entire time. A lot of these races. I mean, I hiked the race I did yesterday, 50K. It had 6,000 feet of climbing, so there was quite a bit of time where I was just hiking, and that's way less impact. And so when you're doing them years after years, I think people that are not super highly competitive, you can just kind of roll into the next race without having too many issues. I've noticed some of the races where I hike more, I recover faster, and I think it's just because of the lower impact. And I think ultra runners in general, I would say a lot of us, we had old addictions and we found running, and that's kind of turned into our new addiction, obviously much healthier, but it seems to be another way to, you just get wrapped up into it so easily, and you don't want to miss. There's so many races now, and you don't want to miss the party at all these races and seeing your friends. It's like big family reunions at some of these things. And yeah, I think, there's been times in my life where I've gotten a little bit overboard, and, you got to take a step back every once in a while and kind of soak in all the accomplishments that you have achieved over a certain period of time. But I think for the most part, ultra runners, they like testing their limits. And if you are successful in finishing one, well, let's see if we can do two close together, or three, or four, or five. And it just, it's kind of a snowball effect, I guess.
I guess I can say this too. How I first became aware of you, I was supposed to bring this up at the beginning if I would have followed my notes here. But how I first became aware of you was last year, 2023, at Cool Moon.
Okay.
And so this would be a race that isn't in your backyard, but it takes some travel for you to be able to get there. And yeah, I'm over there doing my first 100K. Yeah, there was this guy who kept lapping me on this figure 8 course at Cool Moon. And I'm like, dude, who is this guy? Like, he's like prancing around like a gazelle over here. And then I was coming up toward the end of my 100K, I think. Yeah, toward the end of it, in the dark. And then here comes the same guy prancing through, but with a pacer. I'm not sure if it was your wife or not or something, no, but with a pacer friend, yeah, coming through and just like chatting it up. I'm over here like dying in the pain cave and just chatting and like having a nice conversation. Hey, coming through, and nice, and just whoop, right past me, finishes, gets the course record, I believe, and that was you, obviously. And that's the first time I became aware of you. I'm like, who is this dude? So I looked at the race results. I'm like, Jake Jackson, brilliant name. That's a great athletic name. That's an easy name to remember. And then I look at you on Ultra Sign Up. I'm like, holy cow! Like this dude's like, he's good. He's really, really good. And then started following you. But yeah, so a lot of these races are not super local to you. How does that work according to your work? Like, they don't care as long as you're back there on Monday, or do they allow you extra time off because you're an athlete that's doing big events? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, my work, I would say probably there's maybe a couple guys that know that I run at the level I do. Most of them just have no clue. They always ask me, like, how do you stay skinny? Like, most people, when they go into feeder and they're not in package anymore, you're sitting, you're eating not very healthy, and they call it you gain 50 pounds, whatever. It's kind of a joke. But yeah, I mean, I'm, I guess, lucky. I don't get sick all that often. So a lot of the races that I do, I use sick days, and we schedule our entire calendar for the year in March. So I'll have my whole race plan set, and I'll just schedule whatever, if I need a Friday to drive out to a race, or there's even races where I'll drive out just early in the morning on a Saturday and do the race and then drive back. And yeah, those Mondays are always hard coming back to work, and you're sore, and people are looking at you funny because you're limping around, and, they ask you, oh, did you hurt yourself this weekend? And I tell them what I did, and they're like, oh my God, dude, I don't even know how you're even walking at all at this point with running 100 miles or whatever. But I mean, I've gotten to the point where now, you just get used to it. I guess I've just been doing it so long that I kind of take it for granted, being able to run at a, relatively often. I mean, last year, when that was the 4th race at Cool Moon out of a series of 5 that I'd done, starting in, I believe it was March. I did 5 100-mile races, 5 consecutive months, and the goal was to run them all under 85 hours. And I ended up, I think it was somewhere around 82 or 83 hours total for the 5. And that was a big kind of experiment. I had never done anything like that. There's guys that are running 100-milers every weekend, some of them, or every, doing them for months and months at a time. And yeah, my work, they don't, like I said, there's a few guys that know that I run. And I mean, just recently I've been having more of some of the dispatchers and the upper management they're finding me on Instagram, and are like, "Hey, this guy is a driver for us. Like, what's going on here?" And part of me kind of wishes they would not know what I was doing on the weekend because, obviously, if I'm calling in sick without running a race, that doesn't look very good on me. But they give us those sick days for a reason. If we need to take them, we take them. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I was curious about that. I'm like, because you have so many races, obviously, but yeah, for you to show up and then, like even like the day of, go and get it and then went back to work, which takes me to probably one of the hardest pictures I've ever seen. Like recently there was a Trump assassination picture that goes pretty hard, but this picture of Jake Jackson. So you're like, there's a picture of you. This is after you complete Cocodona 250. And for those who are not aware of what Cocodona 250 is, go ahead and Google it. It's a brutal race in the mountains of Arizona, in the heat of Arizona, 250 miles. And yeah, just a race that breaks down the best ultra runners on the planet just get tore to pieces on this race. And it's your first Cocodona 250, you finish it, and then the following Monday, there's a picture of you with a Cocodona 250 belt buckle on, heading into work. I'm like, that is the hardest freaking picture I might have ever seen. Like, that goes in the caliber of seeing that photo where you see the guys, like the laborers back in the day, sitting on the edge of a beam. Like that picture that goes really hard. Like, this picture was so bad. And it's like, okay, this dude just completed 250 miles in Cocodona, in Arizona, in the heat over the course of days, and then shows up Monday to work with his finisher's buckle on. Just freaking amazing, dude. So like that picture is iconic to me in terms of racing, like ultra racing.
Yeah, it's funny too because we are not technically allowed to wear. That's not a UPS buckle that we're allowed to wear, so I don't like really show that off while I'm at work. But the couple guys that I do talk to, they're always like blown away by some of the buckles that I've collected over the years, and I try to wear them at least for that week afterwards. And then they go into a cigar box that I have in a drawer sitting there, and they never get worn again. But yeah, I mean, luckily I did have a few days. I finished on a Thursday and had a couple days to recover. And yeah, some of the harder ones is when I finish, Sunday morning, Sunday, in the afternoon, and you go home and you're already sleep deprived from the race, and then you have to get up and go to work the next day. And the legs are just not feeling good. And luckily most of my route is local, so I'm not driving for very long. So it's half an hour driving here and there, and you get out and you have to stretch the back out and stretch the legs out, and you kind of just stand there for a second and say, like, what's going on here? And people are like, why is he not walking or moving right now? And yeah, it's kind of the joke at my work with seeing, oh, there's Jake again, he must have ran a race because he's not moving around very well.
Oh, he's like moving around like the rest of us now. Now he's normal, All right. Well, I had to bring that up because I saw that picture. I'm like, that, like, if anybody has an understanding contextually, even just a loose understanding contextually of what Cocodona 250 is, and then to see you show up the next or the following that Monday to work with the finisher's buckle on, that is such a bad picture. Okay, so let's kind of step back to the therapist in me wants to kind of step back to childhood a little bit, or earlier experiences. What was your life like growing up, upbringing, and that sort of thing?
We were middle class. Dad was a truck driver or worked for a trucking company. My grandfather owned a trucking company, so I'm third generation truck driver, which is weird for me to say because growing up, I said I will never drive a truck. Like, it was just, I just never saw myself doing that. we were a middle class family, got to travel a lot. I don't, people ask me where do you find your drive? And I think a lot of it came from my mom. She was very adventurous, and she was the leader of my sister's Girl Scout troop, so we would go hiking and camping quite a bit. So I think I got out in nature, and I found myself, liking to be out in nature and going out and exploring on my own. I played soccer. That was my first sport. I played sports all through elementary and into junior high. So I was very active. I would not say that I was ever like the superstar athlete growing up. I was kind of just the guy that kind of knew how to play every position. I wasn't great at it, but I wasn't terrible either. And then I kind of lost my love for sports in general and discovered music. Started picking up the guitar, wanting to be in a band. And, I think that was kind of the beginning of where I just took this different direction in life, not really caring too much about my health. It was more about just having fun, and started probably drinking too much, smoking too much. And yeah, that went on for several years. My wife and I have 3 kids, and after our daughter was born, the last kid, we got to a point where it was just like, we need to do something for our health. We were both overweight, and just got gym membership and started working out. And yeah, that's kind of where the whole running thing got introduced back into my life. It was something that I was good at, or decent at it, from the beginning. So it was never really hard for me, I guess. I'm lucky in that regards. But yeah, everybody has their own path to finding running, and mine was just basically trying to lose a little weight. So yeah, that's a good question. I mean, when I started, I started running before my wife did. I got into competitive running, going to races and stuff, and she was always, biggest cheerleader at the finish line, cheering me on and always supported me in that. And then it got to the point where she wanted to be a part of it too. She wanted to bring home a medal. And so she got into it too, and, did very well at doing ultra running. And I think for me, I've always had a competitive side with myself, and maybe in some regards comparing myself to my peers, wanting to do better than them. And that was always probably a driving motivator. I'd see somebody who was my same age or a little bit older, and I would say, well, if he can do it, why can't I? And my wife, she has always been more of a experience being out in nature. We'll go out sometimes for runs, and I'm like, okay, I need to get this certain run done in this amount of time. And she's like, oh, let's go down this way, and oh, let's look at that. Oh, this is so pretty, and which is good for me to slow down and kind of enjoy the whole, process too. And so we've kind of balanced each other in those ways where, if she's ever had questions about, injury, I think it's hard for some people who are married when there's only one spouse who is into a sport. she understands what drives me because she's gone through it herself, which has been a big help. She used to crew me at quite a few of these races, and it always seemed like she was always more wrecked after some of these races than I was. So she's backed off from, taking care of herself now. And I a lot of the times I go out and do some of these races, or the majority of them, by myself now. When I brought up the fact that I wanted to do Cocodona, first thing she said was like, well, you're doing that by yourself, because I'm not going to be out there for 4 or 5 days, which is totally fine. I totally get it. It takes a lot out of a crew to be out there and give up, sleep and all that for somebody else. Running it's for the most part a very selfish sport, and I'm lucky. I have a partner who's, supportive of me chasing my own dreams and doing that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it's just hard for someone to connect. Running takes up quite a bit of my time, and I always try to prioritize, my family time and work time. And so I'm usually up early in the morning while they're sleeping to get my run in. And, I always try to make sure that before I commit to a race or something, I make sure that, that time is available. And, when the race is done, like yesterday, I came home and my sister reached out and had an extra ticket to go to see a concert. And I was like, well, this will be a great chance to go spend some time with my sister, that I don't get to see all that often. Yes, I was totally planned to go home and just veg out on the couch the rest of the day and kick the feet up. But, you sacrifice, your own recovery to go spend time with your loved ones. And that I try to make that a priority at all times. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was going to be a question of mine. You're running during the week. You're putting in, I think you said somewhere around 90 miles a week. And so you're putting in consistent, heavy amount. Now, for you to run 90 miles and for me to run 90 miles, time-wise, is going to be significantly different, like in terms of the type of time investment that would be in there. But still, there's a heavy investment in there for you to get that done. And so one of my questions is going to be, how do you manage the full-time job, children, wife, like you said, even extended family, sister, that sort of stuff, having a life outside of running, let's say, how do you balance all that? Is it just because you're waking up super early to get it in? Like, how are you managing that?
Well, when the kids were younger, it was harder. Obviously, they needed my attention. My wife was working, so I'd have to be on with the kids. Scheduling was harder. Now my kids are older. They are, half the time I don't even know if they even know I'm home. And I think they know that this is like one of my passions and what I like to do. So it's always, yeah, like you're saying, I get up early. On the weekends, I'll get up at 4:00 and, I'll get my run done, my long runs. And then if we have something planned later on in the afternoon, they're getting up and getting around and we'll go out and do that. The whole question of balance, I don't really believe that there is a balance. I think it's just you make it work. You don't make excuses. I think I'm lucky that my family understands this side of me, and that I'm a better person when I get to go out and run and compete. And I think they understand that this is a big part of my life. And when the kids were younger, they were always excited about either coming out to the races or hearing about how my race went. But at this point, they're kind of jaded to the fact that I do this so much. I came home yesterday and my daughter came downstairs and she's like, "Oh, how was the race?" I'm like, "Good." And she's like, "Did you win?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't win." I don't win every single race I do. And I know it's important for them to see me doing difficult things and being committed to something. I don't know how much it rubs off on them. I hope it, they take a little bit part of that. And that's, finishing Cocodona was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And, during the race, you think to yourself, why am I still doing this? Like, what is keeping me going? And, one thing that always resonates in my brain for some of those, hard times is like, I don't want to go home and tell my kids that I quit. You take all this time away from them training. These races are obviously not cheap, and you're taking, it's a lot that you put into them. And then just to say that you came home and quit because you didn't feel good, or, whatever lame excuse that our brains are telling us in the moment of, some of these hard times, that always doesn't sit very well to me, So I try to like set that example that, if dad can get up and run at 4 o'clock in the morning for a goal, like you guys can do it too. So that's one of those driving forces for finishing some of these harder races.
Yeah, I can very much relate. My kids are still young enough to be impressed by it. They're not at the jaded stage yet. But my bias, being a father of four, is that, and maybe I just want this to be true. I don't know if it's true or not, but my bias is that by modeling doing these things and normalizing these extreme things, that when my kids come up, inevitably when they're faced with some challenge that feels impossible or feels heartbreaking or feels physically miserable or whatever, that they can be, they're just like, okay, well, this is part of life. There isn't like an out excuse for them. That's built in. It's more of like, this sucks, but let's get it done. And so you haven't, and do you mind me asking, how old are you kids?
I have a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 15-year-old. 15, yeah. I'm like,
okay,
yeah, hard to keep track sometimes.
Yeah. And does it seem you haven't seen the result of that modeling take effect at all? Like, what did you say?
I think, when they come downstairs and they're complaining about doing a chore, I'm like, listen, I did this today. Like, I don't want to hear nothing. And so, yeah, I mean, they're teenagers,
Yeah.
they're going to give you every excuse in the book not to do something anyways. But yeah, our oldest son, he ran cross country and track all through high school. And he was never the type that was competitive, but he enjoyed the social aspect of running. And, he ran a 50K last year, and pretty much since then he hasn't run a step since then. And, running's not for everybody. And, we were still proud that he put himself through that and stuck with it. And hopefully that's something later on in life he can look back on and say, well, I did this. And
yeah. I think my oldest, that is 10, can run better than me. I'm not a gifted runner, and I don't like running. I hate running.
Yeah.
I do it because I hate it. I really, like, today was just like every excuse in the book not to squeeze it in, and it's like, I gotta squeeze this in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, those people that say that they love running, I think it's just them trying to convince themselves that they do it, because running sucks sometimes. There's no way around it. I mean, nobody likes to get up that early in the morning to get a run in that you're not getting paid for. I mean, granted, there's tons of mental, benefits to doing it. And I always tell my coworkers, like, me going out and running 10 miles is the hardest thing I do. And I do it right at the beginning of the day. So whatever stress that comes later on during the day, it's like, well, you've already done something harder than that. So, just, it sets the stage for your entire day. And for me, at least.
I don't know, your buddy Andy Glaze. I don't know.
Yeah,
he might like running.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had plenty of conversations with him, and in some ways, I think, like I was saying, it's a good way to relieve PTSD, and the job that he has, he gets a ton of it, and my job is not nearly as stressful as his. And yeah, I mean, we use running in different ways. Who knows? Maybe we all could run a lot less if we just had some psychiatric help, speaking to a therapist or something. But I think running might be the cheaper way to go in the end.
And look, yeah, I've done plenty of psychiatric help. I'm a therapist myself, dude. And then let me stay off the meds, go run. If you can stay off of meds and use run as your medicinal thing, then use running. It's far more beneficial in every measurable way. So that's my recommendation as a professional clinician. Yeah, I hope to one day talk to him because I want to have a conversation about PTSD. I have PTSD from combat. I'm a combat veteran. And yeah, I think it's an important conversation that needs to be had in terms of how doing something like what he does for medicinal purpose, how that helps. And it helps beyond just like, oh, I can bear through what I had to deal with this week from a trauma standpoint. It helps me connect and attune to my family. It helps me connect and attune to these things that I care about in life and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think there's a common thread between you and I, besides Cool Moon, that I think I saw a while back. And it's not just a common thread between you and I, because it would be Ed Eddinghausen, the jester. And so he's probably a common thread between thousands of runners, because that dude's like, he's that guy that's running. You said the guy that runs 100 miles every weekend. Right. That's Ed. And so, yeah, I had the pleasure of running my first 100 with Ed, and it was on a looped event in Rockland, California. And, Ray Sanchez, I'm not sure if you're aware of Ray Sanchez, but yeah. So Ray's a phenomenal dude. And Ray kind of did some coaching and some kind of helping me in that first 100. It was funny because Ray's like talking to me on the phone. I actually met Ray at the Cool Moon. That's when I met Ray. And then ever since then, he's like, hey, give me a call. You want any tips, whatever. I'm like, I'm not going to pass up that resource. Right. I'm going to, of course, definitely. I'm going to call him. So I called him. We sparked up a little connection. And then he would kind of help me. I would ask him with some questions after a long run or whatever. He'd help me. So anyway, like the day before my first 100, I call Ray. I'm like, hey, so, any last minute advice? He's like, where are you running? What's the running event? And I told him. He goes, oh yeah, I think I'm going to go do that. I'm going to jump in. And like, you're just going to jump in on a whim to get some miles in? Okay. And then he ends up winning the thing. Oh, wow. Ray Sanchez wins. He just jumps in to get miles in and then wins the event. But since he was out there doing that with me, he would pass me, give me like, hey, slow down or something. And then on one of the times he passed me, he's like, go run with the jester. He's running the pace you need to be at. So I started running with the jester and probably put in, 10 miles or something. I don't know, with him, but it was great. And then I made that connection with them. And then Ed ended up being, I think, my third guest on this podcast. Okay. And he's already called dibs for being guest 100. He's like, you get to 100 episodes. I need to be on the 100th episode. I'm like, dude, you got it, man. Are you kidding me? Like, come on. That'd be perfect. But so yeah, let's talk about your connection with Ed.
Yeah, a kind of funny story. I was back in the road running days. One of the cities close by, they had an inaugural, I believe it was a half marathon the first year they did it. Signed up for it, wasn't expecting anything, and I ended up winning the race. And there was this weird guy walking around with a jester costume. I was like, who is this guy? Like, I guess he was part of the race, helped organize it and things. Well, he gave me my trophy at the end of the race. And he was like, oh man, you should really look at running ultra marathons. And I had really no idea what even an ultra marathon was at the time. Like, why would you run further than a marathon? I obviously knew what a marathon was. And it's like, why would you do something like that? And I think I connected with, or just looked for him on Facebook. And I was just blown away by how many, 100+ mile races that he had already racked up. I didn't actually see his big chain of belt buckles. He didn't have it with him at the time. But yeah, I mean, Ed and I have probably, any fixed time race is usually there. And so we constantly see each other at races all the time now. And he's always, he's super supportive with everybody, but he's been there for several of my course records, like Nanny Goat and races that I've done really well at a jackpot. And just really, really supportive guy. Every time I see him, I look at his shoes. That's the first thing I look at. He never has on a new pair of shoes. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
He's got the most like ragtag looking pair of shoes, and he goes out and runs, hundreds of miles in them. And yeah, it's some of the stuff he does. You think either this guy is just crazy or he's figured something out. I never know which one it is with him. So really cool guy. And yeah, he's just always there, every race. It's like, oh, well, there's Ed again. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll have the pleasure of running with them next month at 100. Was it Rendezvous? Rendezvous
Sure.
is what it's
Yep.
called.
Heard of that. Yeah.
But, yeah, is he crazy or is he a genius? I don't know. Maybe both. I don't
Right.
know. But yeah, he's definitely a phenomenal human being that is always like trying to instill this gift of ultra running onto other people. Like here's this thing that you don't know about that you should be aware of. Do it.
Yeah.
Like you're good at it.
I don't know how
Yeah.
many times I've been deep in the pain cave during a race, and we'll cross paths, and he'll just stick his hand out, and we'll give a little high five, and it just motivates you to keep going because he ain't quitting. He'll be out there walking all day. He always usually picks the longest distance you could do at one of those races, and sometimes multiple days of them. He'll sign up for the 100-miler one day and then be back 2 days later to do the 200-miler. So it's wild.
Yeah. He's trying to get that 60 plus 100-milers in a year is what he's trying to get. He's trying to get that thing. But if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be him. I tried keeping up with the walking thing. It's not happening. I'm 5'6" on a good day. And so, yeah, those legs, like he's walking and I'm like jogging to keep up with him.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. If you had to talk to yourself, let's say a year before you made the change, the big change, what would be the imparting wisdom that you would have given yourself?
Well, I've had a little bit of a not down moment in my running. I've just been kind of questioning why I continue to run as much as I do. Like I was saying, we were discussing earlier, it's not always, fun, some of the spots we put ourselves in during these races. And, when I first started running, the goal was to run a really fast time. And then as I got better, I started to think, well, maybe I can get sponsored. Maybe I could get paid to do this. And I think over, the decade that I've been doing this now, I've, found a lot of success, over the years. And I think the biggest thing that I've become to realize is that there's no like final destination with this stuff. And it could be used towards life too. You set your goals and you think, once I reach this certain level, I'll have made it. And I don't think we ever actually make it. I think we just continue on to the next thing. There's no amount of money that I think you can make where you're like satisfied and say you're happy. I think as humans, we always want more, but you got to understand that more is not always the thing that's going to like fulfill you. I've noticed just in regards with running, I think I may have had my best years, a few years ago, but I still think that as I get older, the cool thing is there's age group, records that you try to break, and just trying to make the 24-hour team for next year. I may not be the person that made those teams 2 years ago, but that doesn't mean I can't try, and you got to know how to like be happy with the situation that you're currently in. There's only so much you can do, and everybody's going to get slower. Everybody's going to not maybe live up to their former selves, and you just got to learn to be happy with that and not be so hard. It's, the end of the journey is when you die. There is no get to a certain level and it's smooth sailing from here on out. Life is always going to be a grind, and you just do the best that you can with what you got in the moment, I think, is one thing that I've been realizing lately as I've gotten older. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so for you, do you feel like there's ever a transition from competitive running, or is that always going to be a thing for you? Like, do you think the transition moves from competitive running to competitive something else or anything else? Or do you think it's always going to be running?
Yeah, you always hear pros who retire and then they never run a step, and it's kind of sad. It's like that was a big part of your life, and were you only doing it because you were good at it and you enjoyed that part of running, the accolades that you got from it? For me, I think what I've been doing the past couple years is like last year when I did the 500 milers, 5 months in a row. That was a big challenge. I was not expecting to win, any of them, because I was trying to prepare myself for the following race. Cocodona was a big step into that. Maybe the second chapter of my running career was like, let's go see how running 200 plus miles, if you even like doing that. And I think that was always the thing that I enjoyed about, when the first time I ran the 24-hour race, it was like, let's go see how this pans out and see if we can get good at it. And, I had relatively good success at it. And Cocodona was, a lot of ways I finished, but a lot of ways I look at it and it was a failure. But I learned so much, and that's part of the reason why I'm going back next year to do it again, because I want to see if I can do or fix some of the problems that I had this year and do better. Yeah, it's the whole competition thing. It's a big motivator. When you win a race, you think, you figured something out. And then like yesterday, I was, ultrasonic tells you basically where you rank amongst the other competitors. I went into the race thinking, oh, I have a pretty good chance to win this thing. And I had 3 other guys right from the get-go, like, leave me in the dust. And I never saw them. Obviously I saw them on some of the out and backs and stuff, but there was no way I was going to be able to keep up with these guys. They were, years younger than me. And when I finished, I was like, 4th place. I'm 47. These guys are in their 20s and 30s. Like, that's pretty damn good. I finished 4th place and with all these younger guys. I feel good about myself for doing that. Yeah, you just take those small wins and move on to the next race. Sometimes you win and sometimes you get your butt kicked by a younger guy. So, yeah. And it's funny too, because I even had a first place female was tailing me for the longest time yesterday. And, it wasn't like an ego thing that I wanted to beat her because she was female, but I was just like, I don't want to give up another space. These 3 other younger guys kicked my butt, and here we got first place female like hunting me down. And I was running scared for the last like 10 miles just to not let her catch me at the end. And yeah, I held her off somehow. And yeah, it's just during those races like that, you just grab onto any little piece of motivation she can to get to the finish line. And she just happened to be the thing that was motivating me. So I did not get to see her after the race. I don't know. She finished a couple of minutes after, but I wanted to like say thank you for like pushing me as hard as you did. I never saw her, but I knew she was right there. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That brings me up to this quote. So sometimes you just have to chase those big, scary goals. And no matter what the outcome, know that you at least had the guts to go after them. Right. And that was you who said that. But yeah, so this idea of the goal may be scary, it may feel daunting, and there's probably a high likelihood of you failing, but it's still an opportunity to grow.
Yeah, I mean, if you've never put yourself in a situation to maybe reach that goal, or how would you would never know. I mean, if you don't put yourself out there, you'll never know. I think like Cocodona for sure, that was way out of my wheelhouse. I had no idea how that was going to go, and there was probably a dozen times where I said to myself, like, you're not going to finish this. There's just no way. But thankfully, I had a good crew there. They kept me motivated. We problem solved really well. And when I finished, I realized, wow, I really doubted myself all those times. But, luckily I had people surrounding me to lift me up and keep me motivated. And when I go into it next year, there's nothing wrong with not finishing a race. It happens. Things come up, but you can't look at it as a failure. You stuck yourself out there, and you just came up a little bit short. Sign up for another one. There's been plenty of races that I've done well out, and I was just like blown away that I even pushed myself as hard as I did. Had I not signed up for it or never tried, I would have never known. So yeah, it's just get out of your comfort zone. I think is one of the biggest things I've been like trying to do over the past couple of years. Don't settle on knowing that you're going to finish something. Pick something that seems hard that you're more than likely will fail at, and you might surprise yourself.
Yeah, I think that speaks to that theme that you're talking about earlier with there is no end. You just keep growing, and you're finding. I had this interview, Sean Taylor, who's this, I don't know, like he has all the military accolades that a guy could have, and has all these life. He has accolades galore. This guy's like incredible. But his big premise is like always be a white belt. Like go and find something new that you're a white belt at, and then grow in it and challenge yourself in it. And it might be something that you become excellent at, and it might be something that you just continue to struggle at, but just go and find something that you're going to be a white belt at. And so, yeah, I love that idea to kind of always be in this place where you're always growing and trying to adapt and be better in something.
I mean, it's funny how, you can run 100 miles and finish it, and then you go to your 5K race, and sometimes those 5K races hurt way more than finishing some of those 100 milers. You're just pushing so hard, and you forget, yeah. Somebody had posted something about running a marathon and how that's like the most amazing achievement. And yes, it is for most people. I don't think there's anybody on this planet that cannot finish a marathon if you just set your mind to it. But then when you run 100 mile, you almost take running a marathon for granted. Like that's what we do on the weekends for a training run. And you forget, like, I'll probably never run as fast of a marathon as I did back when I was actually training for it. And those things, they hurt. And that's probably why we transitioned into ultramarathon, because it's like a slow burn rather than a big punch in the face right from the get-go the whole time.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I think most people can. Of course, there's some physical deficiencies out there, maybe, but yeah, like what got me into this was into running. I was in good shape in terms of like I lift weights and I do yoga, right? Like, and then a little over 2 years ago, long story short, decided to just run a marathon with zero training, like not running whatsoever. So when I say zero running, zero training, I mean zero training. Like lifting weights and doing yoga was what I was doing. And it took me, I don't know, maybe 8 hours or something. It took me a long time. And there were a couple of moments where my body completely seized up. I never felt cramping like that in my life. Like I ran, the most I had ever ran before that was like 7 miles years ago. And, yeah. And so I decided I was going to do this thing, and I went out and did it. So I didn't run a marathon. I like hobbled and crawled my way to a marathon, but I completed a marathon. And then when I did it, it was just like, it shattered any idea of what I thought, like any previous idea of what I thought I was capable of. Like just destroyed it.
Yeah.
And it was relatively soon that I'm like, okay, well, what's further than a marathon? Oh, there's this thing called is this thing that David Goggins does? I don't know.
Right.
Like, I don't know any other ultra people. Like, and then, so anyway, yeah. But yeah, that it's, and then it's been this journey of kind of continuing to try these different things and see what I can do. But yeah, man, I think the ultra scene is incredibly weird, incredibly welcoming, and it's a fun scene. You know, it's a cool scene. So
yeah, it's weird to say. I mean, I don't even know how many times I've, been doing 100-miler, and it's like the 100-miler is the old marathon. Like, people are signing up for hundreds and they're just completely skipping all the other stuff that typically you're supposed to do to build up to it. They're like, no, this is my first time I've ever run this distance ever. And it's just like mind blowing to think that, how popular they've become, and whether or not they stick with it afterwards is one thing. They say there's about a 3-year window of people who get into ultras sticking with it after that. Cause it's
that makes
wild
sense.
how wild to see how the sport has transitioned so much over the years.
Well, I love that you just gave me a number, because that gives me a number to shoot past, because I've been doing it, like I said, maybe 2 years. And when I was first like looking it up after that marathon, and like how long does it take somebody to be able to run 100? And the internet wisdom was like, you need to have had 10 years of base running for 10 years was what I saw on Google. I was like, 10 years? There's no way I'm going to wait 10 years to run 100 miles. There's no way. So yeah, I did that relatively quickly, and not because I'm the talented runner out there. I can just choose to keep going, I think, past pain, but at a very slow pace. But yeah. And yeah, now the 200 is the new 100, because that seems to be the thing that is like people are becoming excited about, and these new 200 races are popping up. And I talked to Ben Light. That episode just came out this past week, and he's wanting to do the Utah Brawl he did with Mike McKnight, the 300 miles. He's wanted to make that into an event. And so he's like, how can we turn that into an event? And he's got these cool ideas. They just put out a reel about it, of him wanting to, like, he's like, Mike McKnight's like, let's do this traditional 200 style. And Ben Light's like, but what if we did no flagging, GPS, no volunteers at the aid stations, your crew is the only volunteer? What if we did this thing? And he's bringing out all these ideas of like, you're a maniac. That's amazing. Let's go.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I know. So, Candace just came out with the 300 race, next year. And like, where does it end? At some point, I don't know. Hopefully nobody gets seriously injured by doing some of these multi-day races, but it just seems like there's no limit at this point.
Yeah, Courtney DeWalter, when she was on Joe Rogan, 3 years ago or something like that, like he was like 500 miles. She's like, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the idea, what happens when you get to this place of like, what are you capable of? The mind starts to feel like, is there a limit? Like, if the conditions are right, if I have the right nutrition, if I have the right sort of dietary needs and all this sort of stuff that you need, if everything is right, then is there a limit?
Right.
Who is the dude that just ran all of Africa or something like that? Who's
I heard
the
about
redhead
that
dude.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Yeah. Okay. So your plan as far as continuing competitively is to hope to get back on the team, the 24-hour Team USA again, and try to recuperate the challenge that happened last year. Yeah.
I mean, the whole rest of this year is going to be a build up for Desert Solstice in December. We basically have, I think the cutoff to make the team to requalify is May of next year, because the race is in October. They usually spread it out about six months. And it'll be back in France where it was in 2019. So it would be really great to be able to make the team again. And I think there's only probably 2 or 3 races between now and then that are USATF certified courses to make the team. So probably, give it all I got at Desert Solstice. And then if things don't go well there, I have another chance, I believe in February at the Raven 24-hour on the East Coast to Jacob Moss's race that he started a couple years ago. So it'll be my 2 chances. So hopefully we can nail it out of the park on the first try and get back into running some of the mountains for next year to get ready for Cocodona.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on everything. And Jake, thank you so much, man, for coming on. And I'm glad we were finally able to get this done and make this happen. And yeah, dude, I really appreciate having you on. Honored to have you on. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd Podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill. My website is in the description tab along with my social media links.
The scar tissue woven integrates each imperfection, a familiar face. We wear our struggles, no trace erased. In vulnerability we find our place. Rust is gray, not decay. We're chasing shadows in the light.